I suspected my second wife of something I couldn't understand. You know the feeling when something is wrong, but you can't quite put your finger on what it might be. I've always felt that it's some subconscious part of your brain that collects and analyzes random facts until it finds a pattern, and then tries to tell your functional part that something is wrong. Researchers have discussed these things endlessly, citing premonitions and female intuition as examples. I had 4 children with my first wife, all good people with successful careers and stable families. At times, they have been very helpful to me. When their mother died, we clung to each other like survivors of a plane crash, growing even closer. By the time I married Ellen, they were all married or in college. She was almost 11 years younger, but we seemed to fit together. She had the same values, the same goals, and she was hot in bed. She wasn't beautiful, but she was very attractive. 5 feet 5 inches, 36 x 26 x 38. She was very well built. Smoky eyes, so brown they seemed almost black, and a mane of brown hair falling down to her shoulders. She exercised with redoubled vigor and loved compliments. My children accepted her, made an effort to get along, but never really bonded. But they were all adults, and if they didn't love her, they didn't hate her, and as long as I was happy, they were happy. We'd been married about 6 years when I got that itch, that prickly feeling that something wasn't right. I was 55 at the time. She was 46. I caught her in a few little lies. Nothing serious until you put them all together. Eventually, I couldn't shake off the anxiety and went to see the older woman. Melody was an attractive woman of about 35, with a husband who was an accountant and 2 girls who liked to see their grandfather. She looked like an accountant, too. But looks are deceiving, and that fact kept her busy and added to their bank account. Mel owned one of the most successful private detective firms in the Southeast. She had 2 degrees, one in computers and one in psychology. She was a walking lie detector, analyzing body language and voice intonation almost unconsciously. It was very difficult to surprise her. She had 5 offices, and she had as many techno-geeks as detectives. One of her tricks was to hire older ex-cops, both men and women, and young geeky kids. Who would notice a geek with a laptop or a grandmother out for her morning walk? Not much, judging by her bank account. I gave her money to start her business, part of the insurance money I got after her mother died. She tried several times to pay me back, but gave up when I threatened that I would never attend another family function with her again if she didn't give it up. She didn't seem shocked when I voiced my concerns. No platitudes of, "It's probably nothing," or "Maybe it's just your imagination." Just a simple, straightforward, "I'll look into it." She did this for 2 weeks before she asked me to stop by her office on my way home. I had an office downtown, right next to her office. I was a terrible consultant, the guy you hire to tell you how to save your company. The sad part of my business is a big part of telling them what they already knew. They just needed someone they paid an obscene amount of money to appease. Sometimes part of my responsibility was to be the man with the axe. I didn't like it, but most of the people I let go needed to be fired, and I knew it. Others were completely surprised. She tossed the folder on the desk when I walked in. Our neighbor, a 34-year-old married father of 2. He was unemployed and spent his time while his wife worked and his children were in school, relieving tensions with my wife by holding all sorts of positions in all sorts of places. Pictures of him and her on my couch, the washing machine, our dining room table, his chair, his backyard. Even one of him kneeling in front of the baby swing while my darling wife sits on the swing, rocking back and forth on his cock. Damn, what did he have against beds? Mel watched me carefully, knowing me well. "Don't do anything stupid, Dad. Just dump her and live your life. She can't take anything away from you. The prenup took care of that. I know you. I inherited my cunning mind from you. If you think of anything, don't do it. It was too late, but I thanked her for her advice. She looked me in the eye and picked up the phone. I'm calling Junior. He needs to know anyway. After all, he's your lawyer. Maybe he can talk you out of what you're up to. That brings me to my oldest son's den. Mel sent me some pictures. I've already started the paperwork. You need to stay calm and let me handle this. Please, Dad." "Okay," I said calmly. "When can you do it?" "It's Tuesday. I'll apply tomorrow, do a couple of favors, and on Friday she'll be served when and where you want her." "You're going home?" "Yeah. I think I'll be on my best behavior for 2 days. She hasn't been paying much attention to me lately. She'll never notice anything." He stood up as I was about to leave and put his hand on my shoulder. "Don't do that, Dad." "Do what?" "Whatever it is you're up to. I can see it in your eyes." I assured him I wasn't going to do anything stupid. I found out later that I wasn't in the car before he called his friend, one of the most successful defense attorneys in the state. "Dave, keep your schedule flexible. I may have to use you soon." I was right. She didn't notice anything. I had a few days off between assignments, so I decided to stop by to see my youngest son. He was sitting in the back, but when he heard the bell ring, he came out grinning. "Hey, Dad, what's up? Before you answer me, I already know. Junior and Mel called me last night. I figured you'd stop by. What can I do for you?" He was my wild child, covered in tattoos and piercings. In his whole life, he'd never been in trouble. He inherited his mother's wicked sense of humor and my sense of right and wrong. He could have studied whatever he wanted in college, but he took his lifelong fascination with guns and turned it into a very profitable business. I did for him what I did for my other children and gave him startup money. He was a master gunsmith with an almost cult-like following. He specialized in SWAT team weapons, customizing and tricking out their guns. He guaranteed their sniper rifles a range of 350 yards. You could cover the first 3 shots with a quarter, the next 3 with a 50-cent coin. If you could hold it steady, you could hit it. He did all the work for the 3 largest cities around, and most of the work for the local SBO and FBI. He also had a very profitable gun store and police equipment supply line. Thanks to him, I had plenty of guns, and the family often shot together on a 20-acre plot of land I owned, far out in the county, which we turned into a shooting range. He took aim at all his guns. He was married, which I thought would never happen. She owned her own tattoo parlor, was very talented, and her work was regularly featured in magazines. It was love at first sight. I liked her a lot. I picked up a few new items he showed me, never knowing when they might come in handy. On the way home, I got a call from my youngest daughter, a nurse practitioner and partner in her office. "I heard, Dad. Is everything okay with you? Do you need anything? You're not going to do something stupid, are you?" I smiled. I could see her frowning over the phone, her reading glasses perched on her nose. "Don't worry, babe. You think I'm going to screw up and miss the birth of my new grandson? Not a chance in hell. I could use a few sleeping pills. I haven't been able to sleep the last few days. I got the prescription from her right after her mother died. I couldn't sleep from grief. It didn't take me long to get them. They were very strong." Over the years, especially if I was working with a business that I knew wasn't going to work out, I was stressed out. She would only prescribe medication for a week, sometimes just giving me samples. After giving me another warning, she promised to call the pharmacy to fill the prescription. Thursday night, I sat down to a nice dinner with my wife. We had a pleasant conversation. If I didn't already know better, it would have been hard to believe what she was doing. I opened a bottle of wine from a local vineyard that I knew she loved. I'd picked it up that afternoon. I poured her a glass as we relaxed after our meal. I didn't like wine, and she knew that well, so she wasn't surprised when I opened a beer. When her glass was empty, I poured her another and took another beer. About halfway through the second glass, she nodded. I took the glass from her hands. "You look sleepy, honey. Why don't you lie down on the couch and relax? I'll put on some music and clean up the kitchen." She mumbled something like, "Thank you," and snored. I cleaned up the kitchen and made 2 phone calls. "Now," was all that was said in the first one. The second one took a little longer. "Sandy, how are you? I'm good. Has Barry found a job yet? Well, I might have something for him. I'm meeting this guy at his plant to observe his capabilities on the second shift. Why don't he come and ride along with me? He really needs a night operations manager. Salary's in the 40s. You think he'd be interested? Great. Have him here in about 30 minutes. I made a mental note to dump the phone as soon as possible and went outside to wait. I had a mid-90s GMC truck that I hardly ever drove. It came with a thin awning, which I immediately removed. What good is a truck if you can't use it to haul stuff? Earlier that day, I put it back on. A few minutes later, Barry came over. He thanked me for my help, told me how much he liked my wife and me. "Not a problem, Barry. What are neighbors for? Before we go, could you see if I got the bolts on this thing right? My car is in the store, and she hates it when I drive her car. I'd hate for this thing to fly off when we hit the road." I raised the trunk lid and lowered the trunk lid. He leaned over to check the bolts when I hit him with the stun gun. He shuddered, let out a sigh, and went out like a light. I pushed him inside, closed the back door and lid, and got out. I drove for about 5 minutes before turning off to a secluded spot. He was just coming to when I hit him again, this time taking the opportunity to cuff his hands and shackle his feet. I drove to our firing range. It took about 30 minutes, 10 minutes on a dirt road so desolate it looked like a goat trail. I must have been going too fast, bumped a little hard with a few jolts. Must have been my anger. I unlocked the gate and drove inside. As I locked it again, I heard him yelling and stomping inside. I made a mental note to grab a gag on the way back. I popped out to the firing range. Damn, I never realized how rough the road was. But then again, I'd never driven that fast before. He started screaming as soon as I opened the back door. I grabbed him by the leg straps and pulled him outside. He made a thud as he hit the ground. He opened his mouth to complain, and I shoved the muzzle of my Judge into it. In case you don't know, a Judge is a revolver capable of firing 45 or 410 rounds from a shotgun. He went silent. Listen to me, asshole. I'm going to let you go. You're going to walk over to that bench and sit your ass on it. Don't move. Don't talk until you're told to. Do you understand? He nodded his head as far as he could with the barrel in his mouth. I might have broken a tooth when I pulled it out, but I wasn't sure. If I had, he wouldn't have complained. He couldn't keep his balance, and I lost patience, so I made him crawl up, with a little encouragement in the form of kicking him in the butt every now and then. I also verbally encouraged him. This is a Judge's revolver, just so you know. I have it loaded with 4 10-round shotgun shells. It's about the same size, maybe a little bigger than a BB. It won't kill you unless I hit you properly, but it will hurt like hell. If I empty it into you, you'll bleed out, even if I don't hit anything serious. Are you with me here, Barry? He nodded, tears streaming down his face. I sat him down on the bench and tied him down with 36-inch zipper ties, immobilizing him. He tried to scream, but I put a gag in his mouth and tightened it. I got it from my sister-in-law. She sold sex toys as a byproduct for her tattoo business. It led to many interesting dinner conversations, and my daughters and daughters-in-law and a few select friends would get together every 3 or 4 months to see the latest merchandise. It always led to some very happy husbands. I pulled up a camp chair and sat down in front of it. In the light of the full moon, I could see the traces of his tears. Do you know why we're here, Barry? He shook his head negatively. Come on, Barry, you're smarter than that. What would motivate a nice guy like me to do this to someone? Think, Barry, think. Sometimes it causes severe emotional trauma. What kind of trauma can make people snap? Death of a child, loss of a job, abandonment? Oh, I get it. What about infidelity? Many men have been driven to extremes by their wife betraying them. Many seek revenge, pain and sorrow for all involved. And the collateral damage, the divorce, the loss of children, it all gets uglier and uglier. Isn't that right, Barry? Any comment? Really? None. I stopped and laughed. Oops, silly me. Let me help you. I ripped the gag off, taking off a bit of his scalp. There, now we can talk like civilized people. Your turn, Barry. I've monopolized the conversation enough, haven't I? Talk, asshole. I practically yelled at him one last time. He was sobbing. I'm so sorry, but she came up to me and I... The slap sounded in the night. Did it matter who came to the other? Her coming into the world, did it make her less married? Did it make you? Either of you could have done the right thing and walked away. But you didn't, did you? Do you think what I'm putting you through is worth some married old pussy? He cried, almost incoherently. I shined the flashlight into his eyes. This is what got you, Barry. It's a fully functioning flashlight with a built-in paralyzer. You just push it hard at someone and the prongs come out and pop. Stings like a bitch, at least that's what I heard. It was given to me by my youngest son. I stood up and walked around him, checking his slings. I stopped in front of him and took my bag off the seat of the truck. I've got some toys for us, Barry. This is going to be fun, isn't it? Look at this. I pulled out a pair of heavy scissors and flicked them in his direction a few times. He freaked out when I started pulling down his pants. He moved until I reminded him that if he didn't stand still, accidents could happen. I tossed my pants aside and looked at him. Damn it, Barry. I expected more. It's hard to believe this little thing is causing you so much grief. Did I mention my oldest daughter owns a private detective company? Very good, you heard me. I picked up the stack of papers. I shook my head. Barry, Mrs. Oliver. She must be about 60 years old or more. And Mrs. Grant? She's not more than 25. And she weighs at least 250. You don't take away that much, do you? And Mrs. Jeffries? I thought you hated black people. It's nice to see you've overcome your prejudices. Her husband must be what, 6'5"? I bet he weighs about 300 pounds. Surprisingly, I thought prison guards would be a little more fit. You sure have been a busy boy in the neighborhood, haven't you? Have you got anything left for your lovely wife? Remember her? The one who gave you 2 kids? The one who works all the overtime to keep your sorry ass on your feet? I bet it would hurt her to see those pictures, wouldn't it? He struggled and groaned. I paternally stroked his head. Don't worry, Barry. I'll be sure to give her a shoulder to cry on. I'll help her and the kids any way I can. Heck, when you lose the house, I might let her and the kids move in with me. You do know that Mrs. Oliver's son is the vice president in charge of mortgages at your bank, don't you? You never got along in school, if I remember correctly. I'll comfort her as best I can. Maybe she'll be actually grateful. There may be snow on my roof, but thank goodness there's still a fire burning in my stove. I love kids, so it would be a win-win for us. Heck, I might even adopt them. You wouldn't mind, would you? He went soft. I patted his cheeks a couple times and then slapped him. He recoiled. Good. I was afraid you'd take a nap. Don't relax, we've got a lot to do. I'm going to give you some options, Barry. I want you to think about them carefully. When I'm done, I'll give you a minute to decide. But, Barry, I want a decision before we leave, okay? All right. I reached into my bag and pulled out something with handles like pliers, but with 3 prongs on the front. Can you guess what it is? It's a bull bander. It's a castration device. You take one of these. I picked up a 1/2-inch wide rubber band that was only about 1 inch around and put it on like this. I put the tape over the 3 prongs and squeezed the handle. The prongs immediately pulled the tape about 4 inches apart. What you do is you take the steer by the scrotum and put it on him like this. When you release the handle, the tape comes off and compresses the scrotum. It is supposed to be very painful for the first hour or so, and then the scrotum goes numb. After 3 days, the testicles no longer work. After 1.5 weeks to 2 weeks, the scrotum falls off. Quick, almost painless, non-invasive, it's perfect. Did I mention that my youngest daughter's husband owns a butchery with her father? There was genuine horror in his eyes. I picked up the vial of pills. I got this one from my youngest daughter, too. It's actually for animals, especially sexy male dogs at the pound. One of these makes the dog impotent for a week. 2 at the same time lasts about a month. 3 or more at the same time, and the effects are irreversible. I've worked out that for your weight, I should give you 6. The sobs were now hard and fast. I lifted his head and showed him some drawings and something that looked like a gun. One of my sisters-in-law gave me this. It's a tattoo gun. See these drawings? All I have to do is hold them up to you and follow the lines. Do you prefer blue or black ink? I had the truck's headlights on. He could see the drawings clearly. I picked one up. It was a detailed life-size drawing of a penis. It's my favorite. It runs down your cheek and the head touches the edge of your lips. I have another one that says, I love to have a buddy go over your forehead. Do you think that will make you popular with the ladies? I leaned back in my chair and sighed. Well, that's it, Barry. Pick one. If you don't, I'll probably do the whole thing with you. Oops, I forgot one. I picked up more papers. My oldest son is a lawyer. These are attachment alienation suits, legal in this state. One for me, one for Mr. Jeffries, and one for Mr. Grant. Mrs. Oliver is a widow, but she's named as a witness. You can pick one if you want. I'll go have a beer while you're thinking. I'd offer you one, but I want you to have a clear head. I'll be back soon, and you'd better give me an answer. I walked off into the darkness, found a log, and listened to the night. An owl hooted quite close by. Coyotes could be heard howling on the ridge. Tree frogs sang in chorus on the wet ground, addressing the night. It was peaceful. When I returned, he was lying on his back, apparently screaming. I shook him roughly. What's it going to be, Barry? I've got a couple of favorites myself. I hope you'll refuse to pick one so I can have some fun. He begged. I yawned. Time's up, Barry. I'll enjoy it. You probably won't as much. I picked up the ball bander. I guess it won't hurt for long. Let me know, okay? You want to see it? Well, maybe it's for the best. I pulled a leather mask out of my bag and strapped it over his head, leaving only his nose exposed. I replaced the castrating tape with a regular strong rubber band. I heard him scream. It would be uncomfortable, but it wouldn't do any lasting damage if it was removed within 24 hours. I pulled out a vial of pills. They were estrogen pills left over from the hormone replacement therapy my soon-to-be ex-wife just had to make her skin look younger. The worst it would do was make his nipples sore for a day or two and probably raise his mood swings. I pulled out a bottle of water and put 5 pills in my hand. I unzipped the zipper on his mask and clamped his nose shut. He opened his mouth to scream, but I shoved the pills down and shoved the water bottle down his throat. He choked and spit, but eventually swallowed. I was humming to myself when I heard a voice come out of the darkness. "That's enough, Dad. I think you've made your point. We'll figure this out on our own. All 4 of my children came into the world with 1 son-in-law and 1 daughter-in-law." "How do you know that?" I asked in surprise. Mel laughed. "You're so predictable. From the beginning, I had 2 people watching you. I wanted to stop you early, but I got a majority vote. They wanted you to have some fun. You're a scary person, you know that? Go home, you have other problems to deal with. We have one." I bowed to their wisdom and left. Aftermath. I called Sandy right after I hit Barry, telling her I couldn't wait any longer and had to leave. I actually had an appointment but was late and called to cancel. She didn't know where he might be. He came home 4 hours later. The police brought him in. He claimed he had been forcibly put into a car, robbed, beaten, and left on the side of the road. As events unfolded, the police firmly believed it was a disgruntled husband or group of husbands. I had a half-baked alibi that the police easily believed. My wife was unconscious and could not tell me exactly when I got home. I will never forget her scream the next morning when she went to take a shower. Her pubic hair had been shaved off, and in place was an elaborate tattoo proudly reading "Barry's Slut" on her hairless mound. It wasn't a real tattoo, but one drawn in ink that tattoo artists experimented with. It was guaranteed to last 3 months. It was used for people who weren't sure they wanted a real one. If they chickened out, the ink would come off, and there would be no harm done. My sister-in-law was beyond suspicion. Many witnesses saw her and the rest of the family having lunch at a local diner. Hypothetically, it could have been a fellow artist who was moving out of town and could use a little extra money. Just a wild guess. I was on my way out the door on a short vacation when she screamed out, leaving pictures and a no-fault divorce decree on the dining room table, with a note saying I would help her get settled in an apartment and pay her expenses for 3 months while she looked for a job, or if she didn't sign, and I would leave her out in the cold after a very public divorce. She signed. She lived across town for a while, then met and married a man 4 years younger than her, but I guess a relationship with an older man wasn't too good for her. They moved to Alaska right after the ceremony. I laughed when I heard she passionately hated the cold weather. I never asked why she decided to cheat. In fact, I never spoke to her again. The lawyers sorted it all out. The pictures showed up in various mailboxes in the neighborhood. Sandy kicked Barry out, and he went to an unknown destination, right in front of Mr. Jeffries and Mr. Grant. After the dust settled, I asked Mel to track him down to file divorce papers and set up child support. I'd heard he was having a hard time paying the proper amount of support and living a decent life, but as long as he was paying, no one cared. I unofficially adopted Sandy as another child, really giving her a shoulder to cry on. I talked to Mr. Oliver and got the terms of her mortgage renegotiated. He was very sympathetic. So sympathetic that 11 months later I kept the boys with me while they were on their honeymoon. His wedding gift to her was a paid-off bill for her house. 2 years later, the boys had a younger sister. Mr. Jeffries divorced his wife, as did Mr. Grant. Mrs. Jeffries moved across town and spent the next 3 years trying to reconcile. Finally, he spoke to her, and she returned to the neighborhood. They had not yet remarried. Mrs. Grant had nowhere to go since she was out of state. I saw her walking down the road with a single suitcase and crying. I felt responsible, so I drove her home and put her in the spare bedroom. She took over my household, keeping it clean. Turns out she had a good head for business, so now she also manages the home office. I bought us a gym membership, and while I was lifting, she lost over 100 pounds in weight. She became very attractive. Men crowded around her until she made it clear that she didn't need another partner. The one she had was fine. After she lost the first 50 pounds, she surprised me by waking me up in the middle of the night, bouncing on my bed. I think this will pass, she said. What the hell are you talking about? It took me a second to realize she was naked. Weight test. I'd wanted to do this forever, but I was afraid the bed wouldn't hold both of us. Now move over. I always sleep on my right side. She still does. My kids thought it was a riot when she announced at Thanksgiving dinner that we were going to start a family. I tried to talk her out of it, but she said I was about 6 weeks too late. I did the right thing and married her. All 4 of my children had long conversations with her about my views on fidelity. I think it may have scared her. Turns out her husband was cheating on her, and she was doing it purely out of revenge. Unfortunately, thanks to me, he had proof, and she didn't. Our daughter was born about 3 days before my 5th grandchild. My 58th birthday was 10 days away. I realized I would be 80 when she graduated from college. The kids had recently thrown a Halloween party and insisted we come. It was a horror-themed affair. I had a fake axe and a hockey mask, my beautiful wife dressed as Elvira, and she had the body for it. The only thing scary was how sexy she was. My sister-in-law, the tattoo artist, was wearing a T-suit and carrying a briefcase. The other kids wanted to know who she was. I am my father-in-law. He's the scariest man I've ever met, she said. She won first prize for her costume.